It is time for a new tier list since we had Chandelure and Lapras releasing. So as always, I split my tier list into two parts. First, we have the top and bot path tier list, which means that if you pick a Pokemon for top or bot path, how do they perform across the entire game, not just early game, through the entire match. And then afterwards, we also have a central area tier list. So it starts straight up. Again, we have Lapras and Chandelure now being added towards the tier list. I'm going to start with Venusaur in laning phase. It's alright. I think Venusaur totally is an okay lane Pokemon. I think both bits work better than Solar Beam. I think they're both pretty even right now when it comes to how powerful they are. Zacian, of course, straight into S tier. I don't think that is a discussion. I would maybe even have an S plus tier, but I feel like having an S plus tier for Zacian is just overdoing it. I mean, he's just the best Pokemon still, doesn't matter what. And he's at the first place in S tier. Gengar in lane phase is pretty bad, I have to say. Nothing really I would recommend playing whatsoever right now. So either C or B. I'm going to B for now, maybe I'm going to change this later on. Mr. Mime is alright still. I do think it's a fine Pokemon. Obviously, it's fallen off by quite a lot, but when it comes throughout the entire game, Barrier Confusion is still a very strong build that you can for sure consider. I think Snorlax is just a decent Pokemon, doesn't matter what. He's not a good solo queue Pokemon, but there's a lot of strong defenders right now, which maybe makes him not be that strong as he maybe is, but he's still a Pokemon you have to for sure respect. Gardevoir, I feel like, has fallen off a tiny bit when it comes to top and bot path, so I'm going to put it to B+. I'd rather have this Pokemon maybe in central area than have it in laning phase. I feel like Chandelure is pretty much an upgraded version of lane Gardevoir. That's how I want to put it as well. Even though Gardevoir has a better Unite move for sure than Chandelure. Yeah, it's just a worse version now, I feel like, of Chandelure. Absol also dropped a lot. Don't like this Pokemon right now. Very, very difficult to play. It's still a fine laner though, and I think if it's still better than someone like, you know, Cinderace or something, straight into C tier. Please don't pick Cinderace in lane. It hurts. Garchomp, to me, again, Garchomp is a very strong Pokemon in my opinion. We also see it being played in tournaments a lot. So I think Garchomp is for sure a Pokemon you can pick and consider when you like, you know, playing all-rounders. I do think it's a good Pokemon. For laning phase as well, it has very strong level 5. And also Gible is actually a very strong early game Pokemon. A lot of people underestimate it, but Gible is very, very strong and deadly, especially with Rapid Fire Scarf in early game. Lucario has fallen off a lot, but I feel like I can't put him lower than, you know, this right here. You can still play Power Punch Close Combat. I think just Extreme Speed is not really it right now. I do think Lucario is still annoying to deal with sometimes, but yeah, I feel like I don't know if I can put him down here necessarily. Maybe I actually do. He does have fallen off a lot, right? If you look at, like, you know, let's look at maybe some win rates. You can see Lucario is now at the bottom of the win rate table as well. So, yeah, I mean, maybe, you know, it's hard to win games on this Pokemon, so let's put it down. Crustle is also pretty bad. I'm gonna put it into B. You can play Rock Tomb, but it's not really gonna be too big of a game changer. You need a team around it. If you have a team around it, it can for sure be a Pokemon that works. Greninja should not be picked ever when it comes to laning. Every time I see someone pick these in lane, it hurts. Talonflame is honestly not too bad as a lane Pokemon. I do think it can be has quite a place there. Has a strong early game with what is called acrobatics, does a lot of damage, and I do think you shouldn't underestimate Talonflame in lane either. Charizard is a bit better now. I'm going to put him from C to B tier after the buffs. Still nothing that you should be amazed by. It's mostly a central area Pokemon still. Zeraora is just complete. I don't know. This Pokemon is just garbage. I'm going to say it. This Pokemon is just garbage. I would not recommend playing this Pokemon at all currently. It just needs, especially since it needs so much more experience than other Pokemon, putting it into lane, it's going to be very difficult to actually have value. I think Eldegoss is still a very strong Pokemon. Easily a plus tier to me. Cramorant is just a solid attacker. If you play Dive Air Slash, it's somewhere here. If you play Surf Hurricane, it's probably here. So Dive Air Slash is still the superior build. Blastoise is just a good Pokemon. Defender as well still. Easily A tier to me. I think there's maybe one or two defender who are just a tiny bit better, but Blastoise is very, very strong of a Pokemon. Pikachu is alright. Obviously has better laning phase than Gardevoir maybe, but it just really doesn't do out too much. You can still do Void Tech, Unite Move, and a lot of stuff in team fights. It's more like a supporter mage, but it's something you can totally consider. Clefable still marked as a defender in this thing right here. Of course, the support is also quite good. Just a good healer Pokemon. But again, all the healers are very strong, and it gets outclassed, you know, by, I would say, like by Eldegoss, Comfey. It gets outclassed a tiny bit. Ninetales is similar to Pikachu. Doesn't really do out too much right now. It's still a fine Pokemon you can pick. But besides that, it really doesn't do out too much. I think B+ is something that you can pick. It's not going to do amazing, but it's something you can for sure maybe do. But yeah. Wigglytuff is next. Wigglytuff, I think, is alright. It's just a fine Pokemon. That's pretty much all there is to it. Nothing too crazy, nothing too bad either, for sure. Again, B+ is like, you can pick these Pokemon, but don't expect, you know, anything magical out of those when you pick them. Slowbro is, I think, still a top tier defender to me, at least in my opinion. Deserves to be A+ tier. Machamp, I think, is A still when it comes to just a good lane Pokemon, good team fighting. And Machamp is just always a very solid choice. Blissey, also very good Pokemon still. It's either A+ or A tier, but I think Comfy just kind of is just the better support right now when it comes to the healing support, so I'm going to put it into A tier. Mamoswine has fallen off a tiny bit just because other defenders are just much more better. Actually, the win rate is quite shocking. Machamp, can't see it right now actually. Maybe I zoom it out a bit. Machamp is actually on the lowest point when it comes to, if I do this right now, you can see Machamp is at the lowest point, which is quite surprising. I don't think he's that bad. So personally, I think he's still a solid defender Pokemon, doesn't matter what. But the problem is that defender pool is so stacked, especially with Lapras also being released now, which we'll talk about in a second. The defender pool is just a lot of Pokemon right now that you can for sure play and that are considered good Pokemon, so it's quite difficult for those Pokemon to exist. Sylveon, just a solid attacker, goes into A tier for me. Greedent. Green is a weird Pokemon. It's just always kind of there. You don't see anyone playing it because no one wants to actually play this Pokemon, but every time you see it, it actually does quite fine, right? Like, it's a good Pokemon. So the Decidueye is very bad in lane as well, but I feel like this Pokemon will still have more success in lane than these Pokemon, but doesn't matter what, I just don't want to see it in solo queue. If you play the Decidueye in solo queue, I mean, it can work if you have an XP share support. Like, these Pokemon can work. Again, if you have a good XP share support early on, like a Hoopa or something that can get last hits, or like an XP share Snorlax, those Pokemon can totally work then. But you know, in solo queue or just randomly, it's just something you should not really consider too much, right? Dragonite, also terrible lane Pokemon. Wouldn't play it. Would not recommend playing this Pokemon ever. Serena is the lowest win rate Pokemon in the game right now. I don't think it deserves to be the lowest win rate Pokemon. I don't think it's necessarily that bad, but it's very squishy right now, and it has a hard time playing for sure. But I do think it is... I mean, we can look at some win rates as well. I mean, you can just always have these up a tiny bit. I think Grassy Glide Stomp is quite alright. But yeah, people who play Triple Excel, it struggles right now. This Pokemon struggles for sure. A decent amount. So maybe it's actually just the B Pokemon. I mean, I feel like it's the lowest win rate Pokemon. It has to have some sort of meaning, right? Compared to the other ones. It's just very difficult to play Serena right now. But I don't think it's C tier worthy either. Trevenant, I think, is still A+ to me. It's just a very good Pokemon. Woodhammer, Hornleech, has a lot of utility, a lot of stuns. Just a good Pokemon. Aegislash goes into B+. Doesn't have enough for A, I think, but he's still a totally fine Pokemon you can play as well still. Hoopa, I mean, to me, Hoopa's kind of S tier, honestly. I think Hoopa is S tier. This Pokemon is insanely strong. Maybe not the best in solo queue, but in tournaments you can see it's always first picked, always banned as well. So if you look at multiple game modes, this Pokemon is for sure considered S tier. Dualadon is alright, nothing too crazy when it comes to laning phase. And probably if you want to pick an auto tech carry in lane, this is probably your best choice. You know, if you want to pick an ADC or AD carry, you know, an AD carry, then Dualadon is probably your best choice for laning phase. Azumarill, similar to these Pokemon, just doesn't really do too much right now, but it's still quite okay. I think it's just a tiny bit better maybe than these two right now when it comes to laning phase, but nothing too crazy either. Espeon, to me, goes into S tier. After the nerfs to Mew, it's for sure the best lane attacker. Nothing comes even close to it. This Pokemon is insanely strong still. It's probably going to stay a while at the top as well. Delphox is a weird Pokemon because I feel like Delphox is quite good, but the laning phase is quite difficult to get through. I do think Fire Spin. So I think Fire Spin is a better full tackle Pikachu, as weird as it sounds. And I think this Pokemon just has more value because of how its Unite move is always up later on, and the anti-healing reduction it gives. So like the Delphox Unite move reduces healing, right? Which is just so good in this current meta that I think this Pokemon deserves to be a bit higher. And it's one of the only chances to maybe take down Comp 18 comps, right? So I think it's alright. It does struggle a lot as well, but I do think Fire Spin also has very good potential to be a good move right now. Glaceon is alright when it comes to laning phase. I would say for sure you can Icicle Spear. I think it's just a good carry Pokemon at some point as well. Yeah, I do think you can totally play Glaceon in laning phase, but it can be quite difficult. It has the worst EV out of all the EVs, so it's quite hard to get to that evolution. If you maybe can split jungle, it's quite good, but I think it deserves to maybe be actually B+ tier in this spot. But again, B+ up to Pokemon you can totally play and still have success on, as I always say. Buzzwole is a weird Pokemon. I want to put into B+ as well. It sees a lot of pro play in tournaments, but it's a weird, it's like very 50-50 if you have success on this Pokemon or not. Tyranitar and laning phase is just so bad. I hate seeing it in my team. I'm going to put into C tier. Please don't pick Tyranitar when it comes to laning phase. It is just such a struggle to play with. You pretty much play 4v5 for like 6 minutes, then he evolves, and then he's still very underleveled because he was laning and didn't get any experience. It's quite difficult to make this Pokemon work. To me, Mew is still A tier, maybe not A+ anymore after the nerfs. Again, I posted a video yesterday. It's the first time Mew's under 50% win rate when it comes to the game since release, but I think it's still totally fine Pokemon. I mean, it's like still the second best lane attacker, maybe with Sylveon or something, right? As a choice right here. So, but yeah, maybe not A+ deserving anymore. Scyther, when it comes to laning phase, is alright. I think Scyther is just kind of like, I think people have forgotten about this Pokemon a tiny bit. I do think it can still work, but it's nothing too amazing either. Dodrio is easily I would say A tier. I would put it into A tier. Again, I'm not ordering these by how strong they are in their role. I'm just going to order them by role, so it's easier to look at. So like we have all-rounders on the left, then we have speedsters, then we have attacker, then we have defenders, and then support. So it's just easier to maybe look between each role. But they're not like ordered by how powerful they are in A tier. So Garchomp is not better than Machamp because he's here. It's just all-rounders being, stacked on the left side. Scissor's terrible right now. I hate every time someone plays Scissor. The games are so difficult to win. Sableye, easily at least A tier. It's a strong Pokemon, sadly. I wish it wasn't. I really wish it wasn't. Zoroark for me is also A tier. Very strong Pokemon right now. Feint Attack really snowballs games insanely hard. Winning late game teamfights can still be difficult, but it's for sure doable. Then we have the two Ushifus, which I think go into A as well. Of course, laning phase can be difficult because you have to get to level 5. You have to get to level 5, which can be quite difficult sometimes. But even then, I think those Pokemon, as soon as they get to level 5, are just... Yeah, it's Urshifu. This Pokemon is still just something else sometimes. Dragapult, easily C tier. Lane Pokemon, shouldn't play it in lane. Comfy goes into S tier. Even in solo queue, this Pokemon feels so strong. If you just have a good Lapras player or Zacian player, Comfy just wins everything. So I hate seeing this Pokemon around. Maybe S tier is a bit too high, but as long as Zacian, Comfy, as long as Zacian exists the way it is, Comfy is going to be an S tier Pokemon. Comfy's rating on the tier list will always depend on how good the Pokemon are that you pick Comfy with, right? So if Zacian is currently S+++ tier, then Comfy will be somewhere around there as well because it just makes it so much stronger, right? That's just how it is. If Zacian was gone now and the tier list would look something like this, then probably Comfy would also be like somewhere down here, right, instead. But yeah. Now we are back to the new 3 Pokemon Gudra. Nothing too amazing, I have to say. It only has really good late game. Laning phase is quite lackluster. I'm going to put into B+ tier. I do think it's a bit worse than Mamoswine still, even though it has a higher win rate. And now Lapras and Chandelure. So for me, Lapras is S tier. This Pokemon is absolutely broken. It's another Comfy Pokemon as well. If you play against Comfy Lapras, it's so difficult to win games. Like, this Pokemon is absolutely insane. I don't think there's much more I have to say towards this. And then we have Chandelure, which I think is a solid A Pokemon. I don't think I'm going to put higher than A. I don't want to put it lower than A either. I think it's just a very solid release. It feels very fun to play. It's one of the best releases I feel like in a while. It doesn't feel necessarily unfair. It does have some very OP mechanics though, like Imprison and the Losing Vision are very OP mechanics. But it never felt like I felt unfair playing against this Pokemon. It does a lot of damage. It's also very weak because it dies very fast. It's very squishy. So I think it's a very solid release. I'm going to put it into A tier for now. Of course, might change over the few weeks now, depending on how well this Pokemon actually performs throughout, the next few weeks. But I do think it has potential to be just a solid A+ Pokemon lane attacker. That's it for the lane tier list. And I think it looks quite fine. A lot of Pokemon in A tier, which may be a few too many, but I think it's totally fine. So I think all of those Pokemon is something you can for sure pick right now and have a lot of success on. Now we're jumping into the central area tier list. Again, Zacian, of course, is going to be at the top. Again, might have to just make another one up here, a further one. But yeah, this Pokemon is absolutely broken. Easily S tier. I think Venusaur is a solid A jungle Pokemon when it comes to Pele Dance. Also very good Comfey user. So if you play Pele Dance, Gear Drain, have a Comfey on your team, you can have a lot of success with it. Gengar has fallen off, I feel like, for sure. I don't think Gengar's anything too crazy right now because there's so many tanky Pokemon in the game right now that people actually play. Like Slowbro, Lapras, Trevenant, there's Comfey, Sucktoo, OP Pokemon. It's very hard for Gengar to actually get resets in teamfights unless you get lucky. If the enemies are very squishy, if the enemies have attacker, no support, no frontline, of course Gengar somewhere here. But if you don't see your opponent's team, it's always of course hard to play this Pokemon and knowing what you're up against, so for sure gonna put it into B+ tier. Next up is Gardevoir, which I still think is just a solid Pokemon. Yeah, it's just a very solid average Pokemon. I do think it's quite decent, quite powerful, and for sure deserves to be in A tier. Upso also has fallen off a lot. The Speedstars, besides Dorio, just don't really do too well. It's very difficult again. Cause again, I say it over and over again, that the meta is very tanky. I feel like and people do pick those tanky Pokemon, and Lapras pretty much just takes 25% less damage from all of these Pokemon. So if you play against Lapras, Comfey, and you play Gengar and Absol, the game might already be instantly over just because you pick those Pokemon. And Lapras, Comfey happens a lot right now, even in solo queue. So it is quite difficult. Garchomp, I do think Garchomp is actually quite the good central area Pokemon. I do think it's still heavily underrated as well by a lot of players. I'm gonna put it into A tier. Greninja, I'm not a fan of right now. I don't think this Pokemon is all too great. I'm gonna put it into B+ tier. Maybe I'm a bit wrong on it, but again, I hate seeing Greninjas right now as well on my team. I never feel like they do a lot. Of course, a good Greninja player can still pull things off, but similar to these, again, it also needs to serve resets, right? You can play Water Shuriken, but is Water Shuriken better than one of these other like damage dealers? Not necessarily, not really, right? So yeah. Charizard, I think, is a solid A+ actually right now when it comes to central area. I do think Unite Move being up much more often is very good for this Pokemon, and he's very strong with it. Talon, I want to put into A tier. He's a bit different. Of course, he also relies on one-shotting someone, but he's very good into Espeon. While these two are okay into Espeon, I think he's very good into Espeon and Mewstyle as a Pokemon. And Talon for sure has, I feel like, much better potential when it comes to these Pokemon for central area. Lucario, I mean, not as average, you know. Going to C tier. Zaora goes into B. Also just very lackluster. Cinderace, B+. Not a fan of Cinderace either when it comes to the current game, even though I feel like it should be good. Again, you know, the meta's tanky, but I feel like it just doesn't do as much as other, you know, central area Pokemon. Cramorant is quite good always. I do think it's just a very solid Pokemon. Again, Dive Air Slash will be the build. If you don't play Dive Air Slash, it's bad. Pikachu, easily C tier. Blastoise actually is quite good as a jungle defender. I'm going to put it into B+ tier though. I don't think I'm going to put it much higher. Ninetales is quite fun in central area, but nothing too crazy either. I'm going to put it into B tier. Machamp is a solid central area Pokemon as well, but I think B+ tier fits it quite well. I mean, these defenders I probably shouldn't necessarily. I mean, none of these can really central area, right? So it's kind of pointless putting them in. I think Sylveon is also a fine central area Pokemon. Hyper Voice, Mystic Fire both work in this position, but it's nothing. I feel like Mystic Fire is alright, but it's nothing too crazy. Hyper Voice, I feel like it's just better for a lane build as well if you go for laning phase. So no reason to put into, you know, other things. Decidueye is a weird one. I think Decidueye is actually very strong. It's just problem in solo queues. You don't know what you're up against, right? But if you have a good team comp, I think this Pokemon Spirit Checker is still just nuts. Like, Spirit Checker does so much damage. It is absolutely crazy how much damage Spirit Checker does, and I do think it's quite the strong move. But because of the randomness of solo queue, I think it's still probably just a B+ Pokemon. Currently, Dragonite is alright. Nothing too crazy, I think. I do think I'd rather have a Dragonite than these Pokemon, because Hyper Beam will still do much more. Serena, again, currently one of the worst Pokemon in the game, sadly. B, Aegislash, Central Area is alright, but nothing I would also pick currently, I would say, in the current meta. Trevenant, I mean, you can go Trevenant into Central Area. I don't know if I would recommend it. Drolladon's actually quite fine. I do think this Pokemon, again, has risen up a lot and is totally fine. It's probably, again, the best attacker to pick when it comes to Central Areaing. Espeon is alright in Central Area. I mean, it's just an OP Pokemon. It doesn't matter where you play it. It is just a strong Pokemon. It's either A+ or A, but I don't think I want to put it into A+ necessarily. Delphox, easily A Pokemon for sure. Maybe even S tier with Mystic Fire and Flame Charge for sure. A contester to being an S tier Pokemon in jungle as well. Glaceon, doesn't matter which build you play, this Pokemon is just annoying to deal with. Icy Wind is still strong. Icy Spear is strong. Can play both of those and have a lot of success on. Azumarill, Central Area is alright. Tyranitar is a weird Pokemon. I do think it's still quite okay. But man, it can be a big struggle to play sometimes. I don't want to put it higher than P+ tier. I think Mew is terrible in Central Area now, but not as terrible as these Pokemon. It did lose a lot of damage against white Pokemon because of Solar Beam nerfs, but probably still higher than these when it comes to Central Area. Scyther is alright as well. Don't want to put it higher than this though. B+ next to the other speedsters in this category. Dodrio is still very strong. Goes into A+ tier for me. Scizor, you're griefing if you pick this in Central Area. Straight up, don't do it. Buzzwole is alright. You get to level 5 very fast with it, but the problem is that it lacks late game. So if you have a lot of experience, like Buzzwole in Central Area is good if you play Duo Q, and Buzzwole takes the first jungle rotation, and then you have like, you know, like a Delphox or Glaceon taking over afterwards. You're like, let me take the first jungle rotation, get to level 5, and afterwards I will just lane, so I'm already level 5 instantly and very strong, and then you can put your Duo Q partner back into Central Area, then this Pokemon can for sure work. If it's a main Central Area Buzzwole, it's gonna struggle at some point for sure. Zorak is also quite strong in this category, I would say. It's just a solid speedster right now that does a lot of damage. And then we have the Urshifus, which, I mean, I feel like I have to leave Zacian at the top, like currently in this category alone, so we're going to put them into A+ tier. But I feel like all these Pokemon, if Zacian wasn't this OP, they would be also S tier, straight up. But Zacian is just on another level still. Of course, in the laning tier list, I had, you know, more Pokemon in S tier. Maybe that's also bad. I should maybe have them in A. Or like, I guess I should just have that category for Zacian up top. But the problem is that like all these Pokemon, so for for laning, you need 4 Pokemon, right? So all of those Pokemon can be completely somewhere else, and you have to fill out your team with 4 lane Pokemon. In Central Area, you only have one choice. So if the enemy Central Area is Zacian, well, good luck, have fun, right? That's just how it is. But in lane, you have 4 Pokemon that you have to fill out your comp with. So if the enemies have Zacian, there's a high chance one of your 4 also picks Zacian, and the other Pokemon also feel like still S tier. But when it comes to Central Area, if the one team has Zacian, the other doesn't, the Zacian team obviously has a big advantage going into the game, right? Pretty straightforward. So I think in Central Area, I'm just going to leave it like this. I mean, I don't think it's going to matter too much. You guys can clearly see still which Pokemon are good and which one are bad. I think Dragapult is actually quite decent. I think he's a solid A Pokemon for me personally. Maybe I'm overrating him a tiny bit too much, but I do like this Pokemon a lot. Goodra in Central Area, I mean, I did make a video about it. I do think it's actually better than these Pokemon in Central Area, funny enough. But yeah, nothing you should really play. Lapras, actually I think is a strong jungle Pokemon. If you like a defender Pokemon, and you need some more frontline, this Pokemon can totally Central Area. You're so strong, you're pretty much just a damage dealing melee right as well, and I do think it has a lot of success in Central Area as well. And then Chandelure, again here as well, solid A Pokemon I would say. He's just a very solid Pokemon. Nothing too crazy, nothing too bad, something you consider for sure picking. And did I miss anything? I think that's pretty much about it. I hope you guys enjoyed this tier list. Again, let me know in the comments down below what you agree and what you disagree with. And as always, hope you guys have a nice day.